Rolling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to American Slacker Podcast with Matthew Gertz and Jesse Landers.
You'll see here the human male boasts the size of his testicles. I drive great when I'm blood. It's all about the sauce. Good, get him out of here. Get him out of here. Oh man, speaking of fucking, you want popcorn? I'll give you a popcorn kit. I'm just trying to go to Colorado and smoke some weed. Watch your fucking tots, huh? Those are my biscuits. Now, this is all alleged.
Welcome to American Slacker Podcast. As always, I'm Matt.
And I am Jesse, and today we are joined by the host of the Baked and Awake podcast, Steve Cominski. Thank you for coming on, Steve.
Dudes, glad to be here.
We're happy to have you. Do you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself and your podcast?
Love to. So, as you guys know, I've been doing Baked and Awake for, a little over a year now. And I'm up here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle. And I talk about cannabis and the cannabis industry up here. And I talk about fun stories. I usually get stoned while recording and bring up a lot of times conspiracies, quote unquote. The boys can see me doing my air quotes. Do a lot of stuff if I can that ties back to the Northwest, but I also branch out to more global topics, and because it's just too fun, to always worry about whether I can find that, connection or not. It's not hard. Most of the time stuff comes back in some angle or other to all of us.
Well, you're very good at seeing the larger picture. From my listening to your show, you're very you have your eye on many balls that are sort of flying in the air as you're talking, and you cover a lot of information that's new to me for sure. And
thank you, dude.
Sort of
It
definitely gives a new perspective to your listeners.
Dude, appreciate that, Jess. I'm trying. I'm doing my best. Like a lot of us in podcasting, I'm empowered and fortunate to have the platform and have come to it simply from making a decision to do it one day. Mm-hmm. And this, for anybody who's ever listening to a podcast and early on in their listening or has been listening to them for years, everybody embrace this and know this. Ain't nobody going to stop you from starting your podcast if you want to do it. Right. You start a podcast today, In my case, I thought about it for a few months before I pulled the trigger and did it, but I had been listening to podcasts for just a little while, right? Probably found it a lot of the way a lot of us have, like through Rogan and just a couple other podcasts like that. Being a bit of a fringe topic fan my whole life, conspiracy theorist, whatever stupid label we want to apply to it. I got to a point where, I don't know about you guys too about this, but when what you're watching coming in on the main screen in the house and on your feed on your phone is so consistently poor in quality and confusing. We were chatting about deep fakes earlier, talking about confusing stuff, but just general media and the straight line message to us every day is massively confusing, divisive, low quality, and often easily refuted or debunked by any of us from our own personal experience and integrity and hearts. We know we're being fed bullshit. And I decided to challenge myself to back up my own social media posts about this is bullshit and you guys are dumb and this guy's an asshole and this is why, with maybe better reasons, right? And since I was deriving so much benefit from podcasts and learning, aside from Rogan, it was hardcore history, Carlin's Hardcore History and a few other, really, really cool podcasts like that. There's a couple of channels I'd love to put you guys onto on the back end that are totally unrelated to any of the stuff we're going to talk about today. that I consider, to just be so good. That
Definitely check out whatever you can suggest. I have
yeah.
to say, listening to your show, I definitely get a Dan Carlin sort of vibe to your cadence.
Oh
And
my God.
It's because it is that stream of consciousness. But the pauses to sort of let what you said sink in with the audience, I think is such a great choice in terms of presentation.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because
Awesome.
it is very information heavy sometimes. And it is a lot to take in when you're maybe new to whatever the subject may be. But that
100%.
that brief sort of pause or beat in the cadence of your talking, it gives that great storytelling kind of vibe along with how informational it is.
Yes.
Not to just sit here and like suck your dick or anything.
Oh yeah, jeez.
But but seriously, like,
go on.
I got like a Carlin vibe off of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I mean, I think I have orders of magnitude of improvement to do before I would ever want to, hear that uttered aloud in the same stadium as that guy. But we're all just friends here, and I doubt Dan will hear this. So,
hey, who knows? I don't know what he does with his time. off.
yeah, right. Well, interestingly, I have like the most ephemeral of like internet connections to him, in that I recently was brought into the Darkness Collective, like a nominal kind of podcast network that he's also nominally a member of as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I mean, I've never had any contact with the man whatsoever.
Well, I
so.
mean, that's still like a 6 degrees of separation type of
It
thing.
is
like
neat.
1
It is
degree.
neat to just be like somewhere on the web you can find him and me from the same URL,
Which makes us,
without
like,
leaving that
2
place.
jumps away.
So, there you go. Practically there.
Yeah, we're like best friends with Dan Carlin.
Well, there you go. The guy's my fucking homie. For real though, I mean, that's like that already is closer connected to him than I ever thought I would be as a listener, listening to him working down on the assembly line at a commercial espresso machine plant, which is where I was working at the time, when I was formulating the ideas for the podcast and doing it. It occurs to me that, podcasts, one of the reasons why I came to them was because it seemed educational. It seemed a little bit like a slightly better use of my time than just bumping rap music all day, every day. And which I love too. But what I think about podcasts is, we're sitting here doing video right now, and increasingly, people do more video. I create YouTube content these days also. So I'm doing some video as well, Yeah, thank you guys. Please folks, definitely check it out. I love it. Now that I know that you guys are doing video feeds of a lot of stuff, I mean, I've just been catching you in the iOS app, to be honest. So I don't know how long you've been doing this stuff, but that's fun too.
More recently.
Yeah.
I think
Why
this
not, right?
year
It's
has been our
doable.
We're
video.
capitalizing on a production of video on YouTube. So definitely
Nice.
self-plug real quick. Definitely
There you
subscribe.
There you go. And I'm sure I already have you guys. I'm sure I'm sub to you guys. I'll have to make sure though that I got the bell rung for
Yeah.
American Slacker, because that must be how I'm missing you on YouTube right now. But podcasts though, usually I can listen to a podcast in the background while I'm doing something else. I also gravitate towards YouTube content that's more audio heavy and don't worry as much about the video presentation, although I benefit greatly from a lot of rich, full media presentations on YouTube, obviously. And, I'm trying to do like a little bit of a audio book feel, to when I'm telling a story or, whatever we call what I do, I don't know what they are, podcasts are a thing that I end up having, a couple thousand words of notes on pretty much every episode. So I don't know if that can be transformed in some way and captured. I've been trying to blog, with it a little bit more and cross over, like mesh those things together. I mean, it's built on the same technology, right? We podcast on the RSS feed that was built for blogs.
Yeah, that's true.
So, which is interesting.
That's where it all started.
So, yep. Anyway, yeah, so it's fun. I love it. You know, I love what you guys do also. And as I've expressed a few different times, I super appreciate and have directly benefited from your cannabis research on several occasions. So good work. Keep it up.
Well, thank you. We try and keep up with what's going on in the weed world.
You're killing it. You're killing it. I love it.
I do notice on your show, you give a warning off the top. Hey, I smoke on this show. So maybe don't let the kiddos listen.
You know, or let them, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It's
fine.
not a big a deal.
Yeah,
Yes,
but that's
you know.
kind of you to put that warning up front. Yeah.
I
mean,
mean,
we
Never,
can
we never
go
give our
from
listeners that warning.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
we got the balls in.
Hit 'em with it.
They're like, oh shit, they're smoking the reefer. That's
We're like the guest that sneaks into the dinner table and like when everything's nice and calm.
there you go.
We're like, so what about federal legalization?
This apple pie is great, Grandma.
Yeah, right. Drops her fork.
No, Grandma will be the first one. She'll be like, I love my CBD lotion. It's the best.
Oh yeah.
Right? You guys were just talking about CVS, you know, and I was getting ready to mention that on my show soon as well, you know. So that, by the way, is an enormous story, and it is shots fired from big pharma and from big retail and from, I mean, if it's CVS now, it's Walmart next
Yeah.
month.
Oh, and you know,
Y'all.
speaking of, man, I was out the other day at the mall, and this is one day. I was at the mall. I went into Spencer's. They had a fucking assortment of CBD products, from creams, vapes
Spencer's.
that were ready to go
Wow.
There you
and
go.
nicely produced in like the full, like everything on it. I almost purchased one, but I was like, I'm going to purchase it from a more reputable source. And then I go to a gas station. Same thing, dude. They got a whole fucking selection.
Yep.
Gummy, the vapes, like everything.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
like, wow, dude, it's happening really quick.
It's out there.
So let's for the sake of all our collective integrity, the three of us, and also for the benefit of anybody listening to us, let's acknowledge right now that while you probably won't find three bigger cannabis advocates in general in the room together, I don't know about you two guys, but now I'm speaking for myself when I say anything that is being sold all the way down at the bodega corner store level and at odd, you know, distribution points like a Spencer's or mail order this and discreet shipping that, and is labeled as a panacea for everything under the sun, is not necessarily as effective as all of that. And people need to understand this isn't really a cure-all for everything. On the same note, there are absolutely super real applications for both CBD and full spectrum cannabis. That is to say, cannabis that has THC and CBD and the other cannabinoids like CBN and CBG and a couple other oddball, names that are hard even for me as a, member of a company in the legal region to always keep track of, but we test for like 6 of them, and they're labeled on every package. I just labeled, named about 4 of them. So what I was going to say is there are some powerful healing properties indicated by cannabis. There are powerful anti-inflammatory and cancerous cell impacting and all sorts of other legit, like, we've all long understood the pain relieving and appetite improving and energizing, etc. effects of certain strains, and it's always being better understood. But all that said, CBD itself cannot carry the weight of the world, and people, need to understand there's a bit of a bubble, in my opinion, that surrounds all of that. And I'm not saying don't use CBD products. I'm not saying don't explore them and check them out. We have some in the house, and we do use topicals and a couple other things. We don't do a lot of edibles and stuff. My wife does like her CBD tincture, however, for like tummy health.
I do THCA for inflammation.
There we go.
Inflammation
to help.
is great,
Tied to IBS type symptoms or that kind of thing is
shoulder and joint.
Okay. Yeah. I have. I had 2 shoulders done.
Yeah,
they feel much better now.
One with 2 dislocations.
There you go. If you
back to what you were saying
Yeah.
about Spencer's and like these not necessarily reputable like points of purchase. It's like you wouldn't go to Panera for your physical.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly. And it couldn't be
great
less
fucking
it couldn't
sandwich.
be less accurate. Like it's that awkward of places that you're seeing this stuff show up.
right.
Well,
It'll
now-
be on the counter at the tanning salon or something, or the nail lady will have it,
yeah.
over in a corner next to the fucking
Gas
hair
station,
tonic.
the worst
you know?
place it could be.
So-
that you would want to buy something health related.
Exactly.
Let's be real.
Exactly.
And
Well,
nowadays,
it's back there with those little pills too, right, Matt?
Right, you're
Yeah.
putting it right in the same class as 5-hour energies and fucking boner pills and everything else that you can get at the corner store. Exactly, 100%.
And now there's an easier way. You can get doctors that will talk to you over the internet. You can get a legit cannabis related doctor that will help you and tell you, okay, do you need CBD in your life? Do you need it? And honestly, you need a little bit of THC in the CBD to help get the full fucking strength of it. So, I mean, in New York, you're not going to have any THC CBD, so you're really getting a very limited spectrum of it.
Yep.
So there's a lot of differences, but there's doctors for a real cheap fee. They'll talk to you for half an hour and you can fucking really learn the whole benefit, and you're getting the real deal. You're not getting a fucking Google he said, she said deal.
And they
You
can,
know?
from day one, depending on where you are in the country, put you in touch with the companies that are delivering safe and effective product for those patients. And
Exactly.
so that is totally true. And that's the way folks should be. If you really need the help and you want to explore what something like CBD can do for you, wherever you are in a state that allows, full spectrum or not. A lot of people, frankly, as we're well aware, are not themselves ready to fuck with the THC. They don't care. They heard CBD does some good and they will fuck with that, but they may take their dying breath before they ever puff on a joint with you at the family reunion.
Oh, yeah.
I recently talked to someone who took the kind of plunge over because they're into exercise, but they've never smoked. A few times they have smoked flowers. It wasn't a good situation for them, they said. So it's never been appealing for them. But because of like pain or soreness or whatever this person may be using it for, they started, and because we do live in California where it's legal, it has the active THC. And I was talking to that person and they were like, dude, I was over the fucking moon that first time.
Oh my
And,
God, that's
I
great.
had zero tolerance. Like they took, I think it was like 50-50 CBD, THC. And I was
There
like,
we go.
dude,
Oh
that's
my
gonna,
There we go. That'll
gonna-
give you an experience, especially
Yep.
for a lightweight and especially edibles, as
Yeah.
we all know.
It's a little more
I'm really-
psychoactive.
I'm
Oof.
really circumspect about my edibles use. I'm a chronic daily smoker of like 20 something years. And I just really go easy on those edibles, man. I've never acquired the taste for them. I've soldiered through every time. I've slightly overdosed myself with it.
Yeah.
If any of us ever has, exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
That's
Um,
impervious, apparently.
But and some people really
I can't
have,
edibles.
nice, nice.
Apparently I'm the edible beast.
Fridge over
Doesn't
there.
doesn't affect me. It's metabolites. We're not going to argue about it for the 100th time on the show. I'm
Okay.
sick of this. That's why I just.
That's going to be one of our specials. Is we're going to dose Matt in increments.
Until we see it. Until
he
he
passes
actually
out.
buckles.
Dude, you imagine one day you're going to see me in this chair just like slobbing. Like,
He just lays there like that. He's been like that for days.
oh my God.
So
Yeah.
if I could
Not
just
good,
get
good.
if I could just get to the snoring and drooling part without the like the crazed body, like the crazed body,
Like
uncontrollable.
you need to jump out of your skin.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
just the crawlies, the waves.
The
You're like,
crawlies.
son of a bitch! I was just trying to get stoned. This is fucking weird.
I usually,
know,
when I start to
so-
feel a little like it's too much or overwhelming, usually physical activity ends up helping me, even if it's just like sort of. I mean, you're gonna look crazy
100%.
pacing around. Like,
Yep, no,
Yeah.
get up, go for a walk. Actually,
Yeah.
don't pace around. Go move and change the scenery and go in a line.
that for sure.
That's my
Just a walk.
suggestion right now. I'm putting that out there for you, for everybody. Do you find yourself, wigging out on that brownie? Get a friend and go for a walk. Even if
Yeah,
it's the dog,
Yeah,
it's
you
fine.
should always have a babysitter with that, somebody that's experienced with it. And
Yeah.
I found a lot of people go a little too hard the first time. Like they either take a little
Mhm.
too many puffs or they eat way too many milligrams. If it affects you, like it's gonna hit you so hard. Like a very little will fuck your day
Why
up.
do we?
My girlfriend,
why do we
a
have to
bite
do that?
of a Rice Krispie, a bite.
Mhm.
She she was nuts for 2 hours. Like,
There you
literally,
go.
I could have brought her to the fucking put into an asylum. It was insane. It was like, I don't know, she broke. Here, take her.
just look at her. Obviously,
Fix this.
So like, it's just advice from 3 stoners. Very minimal if you're new to it, like just very little. One puff.
And I feel like there's a lot of new stoners out there, or well, to be stoners out there. If
curious.
we say that.
well, and this weed is strong now.
Oh,
too.
dude.
We're smoking that future HD weed. Okay, you guys.
great
This is, yeah, I mean,
It's that full 1080. Maybe it's 5K. I don't know, man.
Exactly.
I can't remember.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you guys who are just starting out, this is serious weed, man. So
Training wheels.
it'll be fine. But yeah, just go slow. Hey, be glad that it only costs you a few bucks,
Dude,
to get high, and that your shit lasts a long, long time.
And if not, find a better guy.
There you go, for sure.
Because it should be cheap. It's price is great right now.
God.
It's amazing.
now
It's
I-
never been lower.
But now I'm getting my gears turning, and I feel like there's some market for a YouTube channel of first-time stoner or smokers trying a tarantula.
Oh no, that's horrible. That's torture on video, and I feel like
Yeah,
there's legal
see, I
issues
don't
there.
Well, no, I'm not saying you're kidnapping. These would
There's some
obviously be
exposure.
willing participants.
Oh, I thought we were pulling up in the van and like, you're gonna smoke this if you ever want to go home.
No, it's like stay awake and you'll get $100.
Oh, okay.
Ah,
It's like a game show. you know?
Ooh, dun, 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 dun. Come
Got
on
me out
down.
there with the little tiny
you
light.
know, I mean, it could be a thing. It could be a thing. I don't want it to be my thing.
So, actually, we've been talking about cannabis here. You do work in the industry. Do you want to give people your qualifications?
Sure. I guess qualifications. Yeah, no. I work for a garden here in Washington State. Our garden's in Tacoma, and it's called Weed Plus. So really, creative name, but it's one of the larger indoor licenses. It's the largest indoor license you can have. It's a tier 3, and
Well, how many
just
does that
sell-
allow?
hundreds and hundreds of plants. It's awesome. There's
Oh, beautiful.
so like, I mean, you could do thousands in the floor plan that is allowed. So our space isn't even as big as a tier 3 license would allow. We can knock down the wall to the next space and take that as well. Cause I think we can have something like 100,000 square feet of canopy.
Okay. So it's not per like flowering plant. It's per like floor space once it gets to that point.
Yeah. They call it canopy, and it's mostly maps to, I guess it could be as many plants as you want under a given square footage number. But so as I was
But that's sort of limited
trying to
to
describe,
the amount of plants because the size of the pots and everything, I'd imagine, or whatever.
Well, what if you went like 3-dimensional? What if you went stacked? Like, you got a warehouse and you had like a 4-story opening and you just tiered that shit with shelving, and it's not flooring technically.
right? Well,
and
and
cannabis filling that whole unwasted space. Like,
we
It's
have
hairy,
plans
right?
for that exact thing. Like, we actually already have 2 floors, and we have grow rooms on 2 floors.
Okay.
And the large part of our space, which is an old pickle factory in Tacoma. So the area that we're in is a place that's like colloquially referred to as the Nally Valley. So Nally Pickles used to be based there. Okay, many of us would probably know Nally.
old Grandpa Nally never imagined that they'd be growing reefer in his old
Probably
pickle
not.
warehouse.
Probably not. So I want to say the space we rent out is like 50,000 square feet or so, but we only have cultivation on less than 10,000 square feet of space right now, just because we're not even fully built out. It costs a lot of money to have them all and keep them alive and keep them happy and keep them HVAC'd and keep them not molding and, all these things. And to grow in Western Washington, where it is wetter, you need to do it indoors. Now, in Eastern Washington, my friends who work for grows out there, most of them are like daylight, light controlled greenhouses that will be like large automated, pull back greenhouses that'll expose them to the sun in the day and literally roll on tracks and close them up.
Shutters. It's like the whole top of the greenhouse comes
That's
back.
one way to do it. And then, but by far the most common way out there is take big plants, throw them in the ground in your improved soil, and let them grow as
grows.
big as you can grow them right outside. Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
like California, like Northern California, like Humboldt.
Which-
Their Eastern Washington is much warmer, much drier, and has a like 3.5 week longer finish season, than Eastern Washington anyway. So,
nice buds.
for example, you can grow cannabis outdoors in Western Washington, but you have to start them indoors, bring them outdoors, later, and then, hope they finish before it gets too wet. And in a lot of cases, people who grow in Western Washington outdoors at all will often find themselves pulling down plants that could easily go 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks, if it didn't get so wet, right? Because we're out here getting hammered
and that's potentially
September
thousands
1st.
of dollars in profit right there.
Well, or even just like your medical patient who's growing their own home grow, they have a couple options. They can grow it in a tent in the house and, work it that way, or they can go for that, a couple of outdoor plants a year as well. That's for the patient who does grow, not a lot of people don't, right? It's not, you can grow a weed, but are you growing the weed you want to smoke for medicinal value? If you're a patient who's really managing a condition, if you already have all that to deal with, and you're also
it's a
trying
science
to
too.
make your own top shelf product. Exactly. It's not like, it's not something everybody's going to do.
Yeah. Well, that's how we got to where we are with weed, man. How the weed is so great today. The quality of the THC.
That's true.
Value. I mean, it's people that were, like homegrown scientists. Like they were like figuring out the ways to do it. Like in Mexico, the way the narcos like improved all of our strains. Like it's crazy. That's how we got better weed. Is like
Well,
interesting.
also, I mean, even before that, the U.S. government dusted the marijuana crops in Mexico, and I want to say the 70s, late 70s, and that essentially
was
the domestic growth of marijuana in the States, because like if you're not going to get it from there, it's going to end up being grown somewhere. Like American ingenuity.
So, we tanked their crops.
The government went in and without like any permission, like crop dusted with pesticides all the a bunch of the marijuana crops in, I want to say northern Mexico, where a lot of it was coming from. Then people in the U.S. started testing their weed at labs, and it was coming back with all these pesticides. That's how they figured out that it was happening. And people were like, "Fuck that! I'm not going to smoke this anymore." And people were like, "Well, we need weed." So they start growing within the U.S.
Yeah.
So is the Mexican brickweed that I smoked in the late 90s, early 2000s, like post that era?
Yes, I would. I believe this was in the 70s when it happened.
Right, because that was generally quite poor quality. Yeah, that was quite poor quality.
There's subpar.
It was headachy.
That's mass growth. That's people that let it grow and don't tend to it, and then they just chop it and pack it and fucking.
Yep. You get seeds, you get stems, you get
$20 fucking ounces and shit. It's crazy. I used to do that. Hell, we did plenty of those back in high school. There would be a decedar in the back seat of the car.
That was some hard smoking, man.
You're seeing a lot less of that now because they're like, there's a lot more profitable drugs than weed to smuggle. Just in terms of like getting caught because of smell and like sheer weight. A lot of the drugs that are being imported into the country aren't really weed. Because we got this weed industry happening now that's like undercutting a lot of that. I mean, I know taxes kind of fucking suck, but I, for one, would rather pay
weed
taxes.
is really cheap out here, as you know, and it's pretty cheap already in California in your legal market, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys came out of the gate pretty strong.
I'd rather the extra money go to something that's hopefully not going to harm society in some way.
Oh,
maybe because I know in Colorado, a lot of those taxes that were on cannabis went to the schools, and now they have like a surplus of fucking money, and they don't know what to do with it. They could like make chairs out of textbooks with all the fucking money that they got for this.
Exactly. And now, notably, I'm sitting here asking myself, what has Washington really done with the over 300 million in tax revenue they got last year? And I think it was like 360 million. We still beat California, who did already 313 or something in 2018.
Right.
And I mean,
hopefully that
we got a lot of homeless. We got a lot of homeless people. We got real new parks and stuff. I don't know what we're doing with all this cannabis money here in Washington. That's a great question, you guys. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for us.
Got to follow the dollar.
Yeah,
Find out where that shit's
exactly.
going.
That's what I'm saying. Because
I mean, I don't
that's a
mind
lot.
paying it, but it's just a matter of like whether or not it's actually being used correctly. And if it's not, gotta get
Now,
it to the right fucking place.
the customer walking in at the counter is doing good right now, though. They're not paying a lot. They're not paying a lot for their
What's the? Do you know what the
cannabis,
percentage for taxes for Washington?
Absolutely. So we have our standard sales tax, which is hovering at just under 10% at this point. It's like 9.8. And then, like with other vice type products like tobacco and alcohol, right? Cannabis has its additional taxes, but none of them are passed on to the retail customer. They are borne by the retailer. Okay. Who's the final distribution point to the customer. So somebody like me will sell, grams and eighths and pre-rolled joints to a retail account, and they'll sell it to the customer. And myself, the wholesale layer and the retail buyer are operating in a framework where they're going to require a 3.5x markup over whatever price they pay to cover their taxes and to sell it to the retail customer for the marked price. And what almost all cannabis stores do in Washington, I don't know how you guys do it in Cali, at the counter, is the price with taxes represented in the price that's on every label. So the price you see is the price you pay.
Oh, that's nice.
On the
it's
product.
like Europe.
Yeah. But the retailer who sold it to you needs to mark it up 3.5x versus a regular normal consumer good, let's say shoes or clothes or other things we buy that are in sort of that class of things we need, but things they're definitely going to tax. And that would be usually like a 2x markup or 2.5x markup. So there's actually about 17% extra cost, I think, is what it breaks down to for the retailer to absorb the vice tax, and they have a couple other names for the taxes are actually levying on us to make this all work, and shelter the end consumer from all that bullshit, which initially they were putting on the consumer here in Washington. So when you look back to 2014, when we first launched I-502, for the whole first year and a half, it looked like there was like 27% tax on your weed.
Right.
Your 9.7 or whatever it was at the time for Washington state sales tax, and then a whole nother about 17%, which is like 3 different taxes that they were shoehorning in there. So the state, and the best part about this was on weed that the customer was buying and seeing at that time an inflated, bummer of a price, right? Grams were like hovering at $20 or more.
Right.
For, eighths could be $60 or so. This was like high black market pricing, exorbitant, like gouging everybody in the state like they're high school kids trying to score behind the stadium pricing, right? Right. So people were not stoked about it.
Kid.
And the retailer who sold it to them had already been taxed on their purchase from the wholesale seller. And if you were just a processor, not a grower, you would have had to buy some product from a grower that you had to pay tax on as well.
Damn.
So the state was like triple dipping. It was like a triple dip on everybody. It was brutal.
Wow.
And so that put a lot of pressure on the system, and on it suppressed sales, and generally engendered a lot of dislike. So they did figure that out, and that got resolved sometime around a year and a half later.
Say you walk in and you're getting like $100 worth of flour. What's the tax essentially going to be on that? Like when you're actually having to pay? Is it just going to be 100 flat because it's all baked in?
It's
$100.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cali does the same thing from what I've seen.
Nope. Cali is very, very different.
They get you at the counter.
Tax.
You know what? It's the county and the city. Because I think
in LA it was different.
Yeah, LA might be doing it different than my area, but up here, where I get my stuff at a place called Harborside, it's 38%. So if I'm getting $100 worth of flower product,
shit, dude.
I'm paying 38%. It's an extra $38 for every $100 I'm spending.
No, I dipped around because I was like wanted to be a tourist.
So, but let me ask you this. Let's put it in a. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Well, okay. I was just gonna say I dipped around to a bunch of shops and I had it multiple ways in LA and I went to an old grandma shop and they included the tax like and everything. And I swear to God, I say old grandma because it was like a bunch of like older ladies and it was like I never felt more homely with cannabis.
It was Kathy Bates from that Netflix show who sold you the weed.
Disjointed.
Oh my God, it was amazing. More friendly than Kathy Bates by far.
That's great.
It scares me for some reason. I mean, she did
break your ankles
for a good reason, exactly.
But like, no, they were so nice, and they were like, you know, oh, do you want to try? Like, we're making these cartridges. We'll give you one for $5. Do you want to try one? And I was like, oh, thank you. You know, really
Obviously.
nice, really nice. It was amazing. And then I went to
like I'm sketched out, but I'm not going to say no.
I went to the Apple store of weed, and they were like, no, there's tax on top of it, and it was insane. It was a lot of money on top. You know, so
you got both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I guess shopping around in California, it really must be just like what different counties and impose in terms of the taxes.
Well, you guys have a bit more of that sort of. You have some dark zones still, as do we, right? We didn't get a mandate all around the state to put stores up everywhere. There's a couple of real kind of semi-dry to dry areas there in central Washington and, out towards Tri-Cities. So you have to, you can't get it at the ground level in any of those areas. You can get it like right off of I-5 in a little town called, not Othello, but anyway, Prosser. There you go.
Okay.
Or like Centralia or Ellensburg, like these little hubs. Yeah, there's a big dry spot in the south of Western Washington too, where you can't buy anywhere until you get down towards Vancouver, which is almost Oregon. So,
and some of
but hey, Oregon is about to
as well. They're just not letting dispensaries in at all.
I mean, that's probably going to be the case for some time to come. But if you look around in all those areas, can you buy alcohol or tobacco in all of those areas? If you can buy either one or both, you can't.
I mean, like
it seems
dry? Like it is specifically the Bay Area has its own kind of weird little pockets of like this is a neighborhood town. Like we don't do anything here except live in our little cookie cutter houses that are severely overpriced.
Wow.
And I noticed the places that all the dispensaries, at least in San Jose, are in one area, and it's an industrial area. It's an area where there's a lot of just people, like homeless people, sort of walking around, and it's very
purposely want to keep them hidden.
Yeah, they're sort of shoving it into a quote bad part of town, if you will.
It's the only place they'll probably admit a license.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what you're seeing.
That's
a lot
a whole
of
other story. Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, but in Washington State, we have a bit of that as well. I wonder how that'll play out in years to come. I guess, I don't know. That's another.
You can only hold back the flood for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Mountain View, they approved an area for the dispensaries, and then a bunch of residents, I guess, were complaining and trying to protest even having one open. So it's been passed. It's been put through and voted to be okay. But then you have a loud minority of people that are, against
that can still shut it down, keep it held up for years.
It's crazy.
Cases. Yep.
I can go to a winery and take a tour of a farm like it's so fucking perfect and it's ancient and it's artistic.
And sip the
why can't
wine.
I go to a cannabis farm and do a testing tour?
Right.
Why can't I come and see what you do? Like why can't that be a normal thing in life? Like why do we have to have the fucking like regulations so tightly cramped where there's got to be inspections all the time and like it's a pain in the dick and you got to keep it separate from the public and hidden,
Well, and these protesters, a lot of what they're not, a lot of the things they aren't considering are like, what about the people in that area who are disabled or who can't get to all the way across town to the derelict part of the area where they cram, the dispensaries.
Who wants to go there?
What? They can go. They can move to those areas if they need it that bad. You know,
welcome to California.
fuck them. You know,
That's
that's the attitude, though. Really,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, it's sad, but you know, that's something that maybe we should. I think that great opportunity we have is to check in on our 3 current states of markets. You know, like I can go back and find out where all our money went in Washington in 2018.
Yeah.
Good idea.
And Matt can tell us what's going on in upstate Poughkeepsie, double Poughkeepsie, wherever
Well,
that
I
is.
can tell you the California is funding a lot of the they're getting screwed on the deals because of the taxing, like you were saying, the double to triple taxing, because by the time it's to the consumer, it's insane.
There you go.
I mean, the same thing happens with the
Illegal.
dealer and the middleman that before it gets to you, though, Matt.
Yeah, and then the middlemen, and you know, I get a great deal, but I know it's Cali weed. I mean, there's no way somebody's growing this in like fucking some bumfuck New York basement. I mean,
Interesting. Yeah.
You
Interesting.
know, and it depends on the source, of course. You got to find the great source. It's hard, but the black market's always going to thrive with those fucking taxes. You know,
When you get it, do you get stuff in like Ziploc baggies still, or what? Like, how's
well,
that
it depends. If I buy weight, I can get it.
Napkins.
Like, it'll come in. No, it'll come. No, I don't fuck with that kind of thing.
work? Manila envelope. I ran out of bags, dude.
No,
Sorry.
but like what I get will come. If I buy weight, it'll come like in like a vacuum sealed pack.
Nice.
you know?
Okay. Nice. That's
So
all right.
it's definitely coming
Food
from the right
saver.
source. And I'll
Food
tell you,
saver.
because like I've been smoking for such a long time. I can identify weed in every sort of way. The trimming, like it comes down to like, it's past like, oh, this is great weed. It smells and tastes great. The trimming quality is what you want to look for. A great grower is not going to allow just a fool to trim his bud. Okay. Like, so you got to
There you
have
go.
tight nugs with no leaf, like all that shit. And
By
then
the way, we
you
do
get
nothing
past
but
that.
hand trimming at the garden that
Dude,
I work
nice.
for.
Exactly.
So,
You want hand trimmed, like perfect, like shit. And then
I mean,
you
I
want, like,
don't know that
proper-
it'll never change, but that's what they're doing now and have
Yeah.
been doing the whole time that we've been with them. And it's beautiful, and it's beautiful to watch, and it's a bunch of old ladies.
Oh,
so that's who
it's
trims
an
our
art.
weed.
It's an art. Trimmers that know what they're
So-
doing is an art. Like,
Are those the old lady? Is that obviously they didn't see themselves getting into that probably? So is this like people who are kind of new lease on life, trying out a second career kind of thing, getting into like
tonic
trips?
specialists.
Yeah, you know, I mean, they're like, so I work for some folks who are, most of them are Asian, and they're Chinese. And so the trimmers are to a lady, all like old Chinese ladies who appear to be like 60 to 70 or older. And there's like
Okay.
4 or 5 of them who do it all the time for us. The youngest one, like Tanya, is who I talk to the most because she has the most English. She's perfectly good English speaker. So, and I have, you know, nothing but like greetings and things maybe to say to them, and
Right.
you know, a thank you or something for a snack if they offer me something. Because interestingly, they're not only they're like Cantonese Chinese, not Mandarin. So that's
Okay.
the much less common language that's spoken for the most part amongst them. But they're really cool. I'll send you a picture of them sometime. I'll send you a picture of the ladies sometime.
Trimming.
Like, yes, exactly. Just
That's
working
awesome.
the piles. It's awesome. They're so awesome. They're so cool. And they do have cool snacks too. So I fuck with some of that stuff. But you gotta watch out. You never know what's in there. So it's all right though.
So we've seen like a lot and covered a lot of articles that are saying there's a lot of hiring going on in the growing industry. And
Yeah.
I would imagine that there is a lot of cases where, you know, maybe older workers were let go from some of these big corporations that just fucking love to lay people off and
Mhm.
end up looking for a new career. I wonder how many of them land in the cannabis industry, or like how they even go about getting a position.
Oh, I think they're. Oh, yeah, no, it's all over, right? I mean, our industry is full of like folks who are like definitely like reinventing themselves and on their second story, you know, or their third story in life and what they're, you know, wanting to be about. And you know, a lot of opportunity, I think, is probably prevalent on that production side, on that growing side, because, you know, these larger farms, forget our place, Eastern Washington, some of these farms are, you know, you can hold more than one tier 3 license, for example. So I just described to you, you can have 100,000 square feet of cannabis. It's hard to characterize what that is, but it's a pretty big space. It's, you know, probably a little over an acre. You know, so these some of these bigger grows can hold any given person, one person can hold up to 3 grow licenses in Washington, right? And they can also hold up to 3 processor licenses as well at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so and you could apply for and successfully get, if you have a location and you're funded and you've got a business plan that would support it, and you know done your applications and paid your dues of time of waiting. At this point, you'd probably have to acquire a license from somebody who wants to sell it, who hasn't developed it more fully or is not being super successful, because they have like slowed the throttle down on new licenses, but that's not totally the case either. And one of the biggest problems in Washington, as in Oregon, is a bit of oversupply for the market, which is part of why the white market weed is super cheap, and some of it's just sitting and not getting sold in a lot of cases. Like, we have a consistent surplus and are always looking for places to put it,
Wow.
ways to, because it's just, it's not like in 2014 when there were only a few growers. Now there's 4 to 5 times as many growers and processors in the state as there are retail endpoints for that very thing that we were talking about a little while ago, dark areas in the state where you can't buy, and stores that haven't ever gotten a chance to open up. Yeah. Stuff like that. If it was equal, if you had as many retailers as you have producers and processors, and you had as much retail access as you do for the things that I keep harping on, the other stupid vices. I'm not even putting it in the fun, healthful category that I do believe weed to be in, because it's unfortunately been legislated and regulated and treated in terms of the eyes of the laws and our lawmakers and our, law enforcement as a dangerous drug to be used with great caution.
We should have learned with prohibition. I mean, it's so disgusting, honestly. I mean, we never, history, we should learn to not repeat ourselves. And here we are, doing worse of a job than we did with prohibition with alcohol.
We're more careless with fucking nuclear weapons than we are with drugs.
It's just, I see so many, the more you dig into it, the more you see farmers that are just family farms that grow cannabis, and they got fucked in the 90s in California, in different states that were just great farms. They grew other things. It was
now they're assed out. Yeah, most of them didn't make it back into.
No, they didn't make it back, man. Now you got corporations taking over. You got Marlboro buying up patents and prepared to buy fucking mass production.
And that's where this started, was with CVS.
Yeah. And I think us as stoners, we need to make the standard to not buy that high bullshit. We need to go and try to find the lowest source shit we can get.
It's gonna be hard to do.
It's gonna be hard, but dude, that's the only way that we're not gonna become a fucking.
We can do that all we want. How do you get the kids to do it? How do you get the kids who we don't know to do it? I don't know.
I mean, voting with your dollar is always I feel like there is certain strength in that in a capitalist, society that we're in.
Exactly. That's what,
democracy of the dollar seems to usually work out better, but you need to get everyone on board.
Everybody has to be on board. Yeah, you can't have half the people supporting the big companies because they're still making profit.
I know. I sound all cynical, but it's only because I still see Coca-Cola cans in everybody's hands.
You're completely right, dude.
Everything else like that. No matter how high and mighty we think we are, we end up. I do it too. Still consume a lot of the same shit.
I have some optimism just for the fact that if we're able to actually pass laws in the states themselves, then maybe it's just a matter of organizing these things as sort of a social movement. I don't know if you were familiar with, on Reddit, there was the stoner cleanup, or it was stoner trash cleanup.
I did just start seeing a few references to it. I thought that was cool. There's actually some people in our area who do that right now, as a local activist group, and they're fantastic. I mean, actually, might as well plug them. They're called Respect My Region, and they do. And then it's the group that does the cleanups, though, is the Colored Cannabis Collective. So that's the other cool thing about them, is they're they're working in the neighborhoods, picking up specifically cannabis trash, which packaging is ridiculous. Anybody who's been to the retail stores, the fact that I have to buy joints in nothing less than a capsule like this, and usually something quite a bit bigger,
well,
packaging
hell, even the little oil cartridge came with
there you go.
a
Fucking
Game
index
Boy
card full of,
size,
exactly of plastic to get that you got to cut through with scissors
Oh,
and
fuck
recycle
that.
somewhere. But
See,
most people
grandma's
throw
shop.
it right out
I
their
kept a
car
souvenir.
window. Exactly.
Grandma's shop.
There you
Right
go.
here. Let me tell
There
you,
you go.
this jar was filled. This is a big ass jar. It looks small in my big mittens,
Yeah.
but this jar was stuffed full, and it cost me $25 of some of
There
the
you
finest
go.
marijuana I've ever had in my
See,
life.
Matt, you reuse that since you're not going to the dispensary every day, getting 3 of those every fucking
You still,
week.
you still value that more. You still value that a little more.
Yeah, true,
Now,
true.
all of a sudden, we're like ankle deep in it. So
I got 3
that's-
glass
yeah.
jars, that I
Yeah,
recycled.
true.
The other ones just end up in the trash for the most part. And
That-
I
that- it's wasteful.
dispensaries,
And
can
that's
you
a
take it back? And they said no.
they
because
have to use that, right? They can't just use simple packaging because of laws, right?
right, mostly child,
Oh,
safety
that's sad.
related. So,
Yeah.
but that there again is hilarious and preposterous, right? Again, neither cigarettes or beer are contained or packaged to the extent that the
Oh,
cannabis
when
is
you
being
leave,
presently
It's like a fucking.
sold.
Yeah, you
a
can open a
fucking-
beer the same as a soda. I mean,
Exactly.
When I was in Cali buying weed, they always leave, like, the big corporations would give you a bag that was like locked, and you had to break the shit open when you got home. Like, it was like, you're not gonna open that on the streets, little boy.
Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly.
damn. Dude, yeah,
No.
MedMen, shout
No.
out to them.
My
Awesome.
pocket knife is going through all of that shit.
God, dude, fucking insane. It's like I'm carrying a fucking lethal ingredient here.
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know?
So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know. I think we'll see some things change on that cannabis tourism tip coming years. Oregon is pushing hard. What is it? Isn't it that Blumenauer introduced legislation on the floor of the House to try to open up the borders, and move cannabis between states freely.
Yeah.
That's big. At least they're talking about it. And then that 420 bill. So, which is a whole separate other mass deregulation, that I hope actually flies, like physically crossing my fingers for that at this point, because we're pursuing this path. So,
now people see it's profitable, so it'll probably move pretty quickly. That's like, it seems like money is what makes everything fucking.
That Colorado model, man. Whew, she was a beaut.
There you go. So you have like successful cases like that show you like front and center how you can do it right in a lot of ways. For the growers and the sellers there also, they kind of like their structure a little better because they are allowed to vertically integrate, as they call it there. So while we can hold a producer and a processor license in Washington, you cannot also hold a retail endpoint license if you hold either of those.
You can't do the full.
They're like, okay, so if you got a retail shop, you can't have a producer or processor license.
Damn.
Of course,
But that
people
doesn't mean
figure
your
out.
buddy
Of
can't.
course, people figure out ways around it and do it all day long in like ways that would to us who want to talk casually about it would be like, well, that's bullshit. You're totally doing that, But
It's like a monopoly without really being.
But it is harder. It is a lot harder, and there's a lot less of it. Let's say that a lot.
It's impossible
less
to
of it.
single source.
So it is harder. Yeah. So it's much harder to single source. Now in Colorado, you can. In Colorado, you can buy from the farmer.
Yeah.
And so they have those experiences that we're talking about wanting to be able to have here, the tourism opportunities, et cetera, that we need. First off, that's your final real cannabis normalization, is letting people go and travel. And when you land, actually act like adults and consume in all the same normal places that you would want to anything else as an adult. And I'm not saying at parks and in front of church steeples and kindergartens and things, but
No,
whatever,
we're talking in the church. We're talking in the fountain.
There is a church in Colorado that you can go and smoke weed inside of, an old church.
There we go.
Pretty cool. They're cannabis like culture, like it's pretty cool.
I need to get out
Almost a
there.
cult.
I need to get out there. That's crazy.
Yeah,
So
man.
if someone does want to become like, say, a trimmer or something, they want to reinvent themselves, get out of their desk job and do something different. What's the process? Like, would you say is the best way to start working in the industry?
I would say it's super easy. I mean, I think the only people who can't go to work in the cannabis industry probably already know they can't. And that's like people who have like some kind of drug related felony conviction. I don't even think misdemeanor convictions will stop you from working in the industry. Like you could have a little dumb possession history or something, you know, from getting pulled over with a bag on you in college or something, and having to show up for court for it. Even if you largely got off, they leave that stain on your record, right? You know, it's there somewhere. It doesn't really come up most of the time.
It's kind of bullshit though, because they're fencing off the people that probably
the very people
best at it.
The very people. Yeah. You figured that out. Oh, that's really clever of you.
Well, it's just like that. That seems so unfair, especially if like you go to jail for like growing weed in like say the 90s, you end up getting out because you've served your time or whatever, and now you can't work in the one thing you know how to do. Plus, everyone else is now doing the thing that you just lost those years of your life for. It's
right.
It's such a terrible injustice with the criminal injustice system.
Oh no, you're really killing it, and I would only add to that. You know, let's not forget that the path forward today in most markets is prohibitively expensive and time consuming, and
if there weren't enough barriers.
Yeah, so it's the very people who have had their lives impacted by past run-ins with the law from trying to participate with cannabis in the black market or even in Washington's gray market years, quote unquote. You know, we had our years leading up to legalization, and then our year that we voted cannabis legal, and then a 2-something, year period where we still didn't have any retail stores. So we had voted it legal. Everybody knew it was going to be legal. The police were largely chilling out on it, but yet at the same time, selectively fucking people up. Growers in particular, getting ready to shut down that old, system. And these were growers who hadn't already applied for licenses and weren't trying to transition to legal. We're getting hammered pretty hard in the lead up to legalization here. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. We get. Well,
you said it was pretty easy to get into the industry.
So no, absolutely it is. I apologize. That was
it's all right.
Bit of a side tangent, but I do think it's easy right now. If you don't have any like silly convictions like that you need to worry about, if you're not some horrible, felon and you know it, then you can work in weed in most of these legal markets, Washington included. And as far as finding opportunities, it's as easy as getting on frickin' Craigslist and looking for jobs.
I was wondering, do they post
absolutely? You better believe
LinkedIn?
it. Yeah, absolutely. God, it's ridiculous. I get spammed with requests all the time by, cannabis professionals, so to speak, on LinkedIn. Many of them are legit though, Washington based. So they have some reason to reach out. So, once anybody has gotten the most basic of trimmer jobs and put in any time with a grow, once you're in, you're in. It's definitely an industry that's embracing entry-level people because it's tons of manual work and it's tons of stuff that every grow is different, right? Every garden is different. Every processor is different. You have different types of labs. Everybody bought different equipment. Everybody has a different manager or boss. So, there's 1,000 different ways to skin the cat and everybody knows best. So they all want to train you when you come in, especially right now, because it's still that Wild West, right?
Oh man.
Now this all started with the CVS conversation. And I still say that was and remains one of the biggest shots fired that we'll see this year, in game changers for the industry. It's coming. The time is coming where everybody who's in the industry right now, 99% of us are going to get swept to the wayside brand wise. Within 5 years, it'll all be transformed
like the big 5 brands or something. You're thinking
it'll look like 500 brands.
Yeah.
It'll look like nothing happened. I mean, Willie Nelson's announcing plans to go national with stores and even more of his brand than he's already launched. And he's already launched a brand that exists in Colorado and exists in Washington.
Willie Reserve, I think.
Willie's Reserve, absolutely.
Snoop Dogg,
you guys
too.
probably have it in California. So,
and who is it?
Snoop.
Tommy Chong also has his.
Tommy Chong. Martha Stewart with CBD. Snoop. We've got the Marley family doing
Canopy Growth Corp.
You've got who is it? Pineapple Express dude.
Seth Rogen?
Seth Rogen's got a brand. He's launching.
Oh,
I wouldn't be surprised if
Wiz
Doug
Khalifa's
Benson
got
puts
a
one
brand.
out soon.
Okay,
Oh my
exactly. Okay, so
Getting high.
that'll be the next wave. Those will be some of the first names that. So you guys were talking about, keeping it at the lowest level and keeping it grassroots instead of embracing the big scene. We know who we're dealing with. People. First off, we have new smokers and new consumers coming to the product and the plant for the first time in their lives, and they don't have any other reference points. They don't have a friend to ask. They'll be damned if they're going to ask somebody, frankly. All right, because they're going to go and try it in secret by themselves every day. This is how people are coming to it. You know what I mean? And they're coming from all sorts of wacky places, and they're going to get their information from wherever they're getting their information from, and so they're going to see it somewhere that we can't even predict.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
I think the
getting back
point,
to the
point that you were saying before about just keeping that grassroots. I think that's a hashtag right there. That's it.
Right.
Grassroots
Right.
cannabis.
Keep the
Fucking-
grassroots.
Yeah, grassroots cannabis. Fucking get that going as a hashtag. Get the idea that we don't need to have it become the McDonald's of McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, Taco Bell. That's what you get.
Yeah.
Here's the only saddest thing though about that is that even somebody like me who works for a legal company now, everybody would more or less have to concede that the ones who we lost already were the growers that we needed to have. That was the grassroots cannabis. We're already the first generation of the removal from that. The number of black market growers who did transition is pretty small. And they can't really even say that they were publicly either, by the way. Like, that can't be much of your marketing. You can't market yourself. You can barely market yourself as a cannabis company, period, in Washington State. And I don't know how California is, but it's pretty restrictive here. I
don't see too much in terms of brands.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't want to get into it because it's a whole nother, you know what I mean?
That'll be another episode we do.
It's an interesting topic. It's a really interesting topic, marketing and, how you do it in these states, where, it's regulated a lot more like those, vices that we just can't get away from being associated with. So anyway, career-wise though, be in the state that you want to work in. Washington is a good one for sure. Eastern Washington would have loads of opportunities for people to live in, like, small town America environment, and a nice, warm and beautiful sunny environment most of the year. Pretty chilly and snowy in the winter, of course, in Eastern Washington. But you could work there for, outdoor grows that might even be able to keep you busy all winter long, just doing processing of the same stuff that you grew all season, right?
Oh, wow.
I mean, because you're gonna grow gigantic trees out in Eastern Washington. And most of those grows are tier 3s out there. And so, big square footage on the ground and lots of big plants. So they grow them right up until October, chop it all at once. They call it Croptober, right? And then the market floods with really, really inexpensive, high quality outdoor, shortly thereafter.
Slacker trip to Washington in October.
I'm telling you. Yeah. It's a thing, and it's a real phenomenon, and it happens in California too. You guys definitely have a bit of that going on for sure. Your market's going to eclipse ours in just another year or two. Yeah.
Well, sheer population.
Too many people. Exactly. Too many people. So
when you're getting into the industry, is like that pretty much the starting point though, just working as like a trimmer or something, or is it more specialized
anybody who has
depending on
professional
what you want to
background?
do?
Yeah, I mean, you got professional background there. This is now you have companies that just happen to be selling weed. But they have to be totally conventional in every other way. You need accountants, and you need logistics people, and you need drivers, and you need
that's true.
I mean, everybody, and so to each their own skill set. By all means, if you imagine that the cannabis grow op or the cannabis processing op needs that vertical, they do, and they would be delighted to have more real professionals join them,
That's awesome.
Because of course, it's been more cobbled together, homebrew, DIY, self-taught, entrepreneurial, this, that, and the other, up to this point in time. And obviously it's a competitive landscape.
Mhm.
And it's rapidly evolving. It's, technologically dependent in a lot of cases. You can't grow at scale without being super efficient. And so then you suddenly find yourself looking at things that you never would have thought of as solutions, as like a, small grower or basement grower or,
Right.
backyard grower.
It's crazy because
so-
like they talk about the jobs of the future, not being like even existing today or like 10 years ago or whatever. I'm sure a lot of people didn't expect, that like bud tender would be,
Yep.
would be like that a possible position that they could be doing.
How cool is that
Well-
to see that on your tax return? It's like position bud tender.
Yeah, right.
Totally.
Or master
Totally.
grower.
There you go. Little better.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
So we've been talking a lot about cannabis, which we could go on for another fucking
Oh,
5
God.
episodes worth.
Hell yeah.
But you had some interesting theories to bring up during this episode that we wanted to touch on.
For sure. Well, we've been having some, we definitely, by the way, let's go back in on our three respective areas again on a upcoming visit. Maybe I'll have you guys jump on a call with me. I'll try this solution out. This is working pretty good so far.
Oh
yeah.
I haven't
Yeah,
used
little
it
shout out
before.
to
So
Zoom.
yeah, no, it's good. I
Zoom.
haven't used it before. Seems good.
Podcaster's best friend.
So very interesting. When we started talking about sitting down together, you guys had expressed an openness to fuck around with some conspiracy talk, right? Why not? It's fun. Are we stoned?
yeah.
Is everybody stoned enough?
Oh,
You're
dude,
smoking. There we go.
I'm
There
working
we
on
go.
it, baby.
Puffing on
Max
some
Bar.
oil.
I know. Oh, there we go. I need I need to just
Look
at
at this.
least get a
Shout
fresh
out.
bowl.
What do you guys know about Juicy J's? I'm smoking these dyes.
I
Yeah,
haven't seen
I
them.
love
I
these
haven't
guys.
seen that before. I haven't
Dude,
seen that.
I got so many packs of them. They're printed.
That's
Oh my
funny.
god. These are
What's
maple
that,
syrup
strawberry?
flavor. Maple syrup flavor, baby.
I can see because
Oh,
it's the Canadian leaf. Exactly.
Yeah.
That does sound like it would taste good.
Canada,
That does sound like it'd be nice.
But they got
I
got
do like.
Oof, ton of
I'm not too good for a flavored wrap at all. I do go in on that every once in a while because I still combust.
I see you're a J man, right? You're not much of a blunt man.
Well, I'm packing a bowl right now. I don't smoke as many blunts as I do joints, just because tiny bit more labor intensive. Don't really need the tobacco all the time. Has even more of a lingering aroma. If you're trying to like smoke and run
to the face.
No, sometimes it's good for sure. My buddy
man.
Brian used to specialize in coming over and we would smoke a blunt, and if not two, he would usually always light the second blunt, and usually I would tap out sometime in the second blunt. So I'm like, motherfucker, you're killing me.
They're great group tools. Great. Nothing like a blunt. It's like the peace offering of today's times. It's like
It is pretty
let's
good.
sit together
it is
and
pretty
smoke
good.
this blunt.
I have to admit, guys, a little shameful. I've lost my ability to roll.
Oh, you're a sad individual.
That muscle hadn't been worked out enough over the course of.
You tried to roll a blunt recently?
I have a tradition that I'd been keeping up of rolling a blunt on New Year's Eve and then smoking it after the ball drops into the next year. So it's like, oh, it's a blunt from last year into the new year. Kind of mark the end of the year itself. I tried to do it for the past New Year's, and that shit would not smoke. I was so upset with myself. I was like, is this a bad omen? Yeah, it was like too tight and just like I lost it.
Happens to the best of us.
It
Just
does
like
happen, yeah.
I need like
Get
a
back on
Rocky
that horse.
montage of like me rolling joints. Like,
You know what you do? You come back stronger.
the table.
Dude,
I'll tell you what you do. You come back stronger. You get yourself a rolling tray and get one of those sushi rolling mats.
Ooh.
Just like take it to a whole nother level.
Man, I had a similar experience. I brought like a half ounce to Camp Bisco the first time I went, like years ago. And man, something about the weed. Every time I tried to roll a joint, I didn't have a grinder, so I had to finger break it up.
Yep.
Every time I tried to roll a joint, it wouldn't stayed burning. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? It was like my omen, and I didn't have a bowl.
I do like having a grinder these days for the most
it's
part.
so nice. Yeah, I carry a grinder card now for emergencies in my wallet.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I got one of those as well.
Those are great. They work too, man. And you can. I travel with it in my wallet. I go on a plane and everything. It's got weed residue on it. Nobody ever gives it.
See, that's the thing. I'm a little bit too nervous to allow it so
You're in the
such a
industry, too.
contaminated item, to be on me.
I
Exactly.
wouldn't fuck
It's
around
like,
if I worked in the industry.
that's the thing. You got to really like pick your battles, right? It's like,
Hold
I'm
yourself
glad.
to the standard.
Yeah, I'm glad to be able to do this at all. So, I don't need to like
That's
go
great.
around with, weed crumbs in my pocket from carrying a dirty bowl in my pocket or something.
There's a lot of careless people that want to
Right.
jump into the market because they're like, oh, I can make a fortune, and they just don't give a fuck. They're just like, I'm going to smoke weed all day and grow plants, and that's it. And it's
Well,
not,
if we
there's no
haven't-
science of it.
That's it. And I know we're about to move off of weed, but if we haven't already painted a clear enough picture of it, everybody, most people aren't going to get really rich off of weed. I'm already
No.
not really rich off of weed, and I've been
Not if
working
your
in it
Uncle
for the
Sam
last
has
few
his
years.
hand in your pocket.
So it's not going to be like that.
It's not a
It's
get
gonna be-
rich
oh,
quick.
No,
lot of
and
work, it sounds
it probably shouldn't be.
You're
It
still
probably shouldn't
illegal in a
be.
gray market right now. It's federally illegal, so it's scary at the same point.
Yep. Yep. But the path forward is going to be a path forward that's much closer to, I hope, like normal vegetables or something like. How about instead of drawing all the crappy analogies I have been of the booze and shit, how about to like coffee or tea?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They give you a light
You know-
influence. They definitely do change your persona slightly. You get that quirkiness.
I
But
think
not to the
cannabis
point
is
where the
much.
government's like regulating it.
No.
I think it's
Just
much more of an analog, though, to both of those. And because both of those have been considered highly medicinal and helpful throughout history,
Mhm.
all sorts of helpful aspects have been ascribed to these things, right? Coffee and tea have been buried with kings and pharaohs. So, right alongside cannabis. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
they're revered and they have value, and they have ways of being, weaponized and, applied in different, powerful ways. Like you do, compresses with tea, and you can do fucking weird suppositories and things, right? And you can do
Yeah.
all sorts of shit. You
What
can
do they
take
say?
it as a
It's like the
supplement.
tea bags on the eyes can remove the puffiness and shit.
Yeah, they pull toxin from your body.
Oh, was that a hint? Should I try
No,
that?
no,
Yes.
not yours.
I don't see
specifically.
how you could even. I don't even see how you
Look,
can see me with
look,
this.
my-
my
camera of
girlfriend-
mine,
My
so
girlfriend's into all these health
Yeah,
beauty things, so I've seen
There
the
we
whole
go.
front of the mill.
I should
knows
try
the
that,
tips, man.
Actually, I think I might try it. I don't care. I'm not too
It's a
proud.
beauty
Try that
wiki
shit.
now.
We got tea bags. We got tea bags.
Oh,
So,
man.
Anyway,
So yeah, the cannabis talk has been great. And we, like we said, we could go on for fucking days because there's.
we just did, so
Yeah.
it's cool.
That happened.
But I'm really interested in some of these theories that you've looked into. You cover a lot of interesting things on your show. You definitely have a skeptic sort of vibe where you're looking at it from sort of all angles and saying, well, what if? And do we have all the facts for our current established timeline of humanity? Maybe not. And I am interested to hear some of what you brought to talk about today.
You got it. Well, so you hollered at me and was like, "What would be fun?" And I said, "This recent mystery I've been looking into is probably one I've been having the most fun with, and I don't even know, maybe since I started podcasting anyway, but possibly since I've been like." Watching the X-Files, you know what I mean? Like since for all these years, this is one of the.
Are you a
juiciest
Mulder or a
ones.
Scully?
Oh yeah, no. See, that's the thing. It's funny because I laughed inside when you said that I have a bit of a skeptic's approach because I'm definitely more of a Mulder. I want to believe, and I usually start out believing just about everything, and only slowly lose interest as I look into it, and unfortunately, sadly, to my disappointment, find it falls apart in one area or another. Or,
But you're not afraid
results
to,
in
you're not
some-
afraid to point that out, though. It's not like you pick up one thing and run with it, ignoring all the facts. You are able to sort of step aside and say, but there is this other thing, and then sort of come back to the thought.
And there is, and this mystery has one too, like a big weird whoa, like possible red flag kind of thing. It's called, to put a name to the mystery, it's called the Grand Tartaria or Grand Tartary Empire, and a mystery surrounding the existence of such a thing. Now, some of us, we know the names. We know the name Tartar in some forms in modern language. We have tartar sauce. We have things like tartar or tartan patterns in clothing, in an actual like traditional pattern, like a plaid, like a Burberry kind of thing that is super persistent and still made to this day and preserved. You know, there's a few other different references. There's Tartarus, which is the famous hell-like place of torture of the like famous Greek god Tantalus, and I don't know what Tantalus was the god of offhand.
I would assume something with tantalizing,
right?
Like,
yeah, probably something good. Tantalus
right.
is probably up to some of that good shit. That's why he ended up in Tartarus. So, you know, so we have some remnants of the language, and we have some representations on more recent cartography and world maps that would indicate a like large Russo-Asiatic region that was referred to as Grand Tartary, but appeared on these maps to be sparsely populated, appeared on these maps to have few settlements, very little of note and noteworthy. And anyone who observes like older maps, like old like pirate looking maps from like 19th century, 18th century and older, you know, stuff that we would think is like, you know, kind of cartoonish today on casual, like on the casual glance, all right, because it doesn't look like Google Maps or Google Earth. Those maps tend to represent that same region of the world more and more richly, more and more detailed, with more and more like defined internal regions and borders and obvious architecture. One of the styles that you'll see when you look into mysteries like this and look at older maps is these world maps were made in a way that strikes me very much actually like, once you actually take a moment and look at it, to be a lot like our Google map overlay, that when you drop and you're like, yo, I'm gonna land in Seattle next week, I need to get out to see Steve. He says he lives in Seattle, but that's probably bullshit. He probably lives a half an hour out of town. Still fucking Seattle, whatever you want. Anyway, you know, and so you go to Google Maps and you see the highways and roads overlaid over a satellite image, right? So you see the pretty trees and the hills, and you see the buildings and the actual top of the stadium. You can look down, you know, from that overhead view, right? That overhead godlike omnipotent view. And we're looking at that same thing with the Google map, with the old maps. And then on top of it, when you go back to your modern map, the Google map, you have like loads of info that comes up, right? Like those points of interest start populating on the map, and you see the labels on certain things right away, and you can zoom in. Of course, we have a little bit more control with Google Maps, and that we can get more granular, right, with any given thing without switching the page to another map that's been drawn at a different scale, you know. But best believe they probably had those too, maps at different scales, which of course they did. And you do see them in different areas of this research. But Tartaria gets cooler and cooler the further back you go. These maps are really rich in data. They were full of metadata. They had, you know, information about the flora, the fauna, the people of the region, the key architecture in different cities was represented accurately in some little tiny way. The main castle or keep or fortification or walled city was, you know, pretty much there in the spaces where they're supposed to be. So we like to as modern casual observers, think of ourselves as super superior to these, you know, folks who lived in the old world. But in fact, their maps were as important to them, if not more important, because you couldn't just quickly go to the internet again for the 80th time today to try another solution or look for another map to get you to your destination because you're a dipshit, can't navigate by the sun. You know, they had what they had, and that shit did need to work. And when you look at these maps, they were really indicating a different place than is shown today. Now, this is nominally acknowledged in our like established history, but the researchers who are looking into the Grand Tartaria question would say that it has been heavily transformed, suppressed, and largely rewritten.
Okay.
Something that I don't have good notes on here, but that I'm nevertheless going to talk out my neck about because I do remember it, and I'll get some better details for you guys on this. But in the 1930s, right around when Stalin was coming to power, in the early years of the USSR, he and that administration directed like a restoration of Russian history and cultural something or other. So that's the most of the title that I can remember. But this is a identifiable thing that anybody can find in like a couple of, Google searches on Russian history, Stalin, rewriting the history of Tartaria. The Tartarian history was referenced specifically in the rest of the document. It wasn't in the top line of the title, but it was about revisionist, like restoration of remembrance of the existence of parts of their history that they had erased. But of course, at the same time, you don't know what also was still contained and held back by them at that time. But I'm not a Russian historian, and again, just a guy who's curious about this, stumbled upon it. I want to say probably first on YouTube, maybe. Okay. And I've got, some accounts that I'll point you guys at that people can totally look and learn a lot more about this shit. But, wow. Let's see here. So let me see here. So like we will have heard of, so I just referenced the area and I referenced, a timeline that sort of says, let me put a finer point on it. We see stuff that looks like a Tartaria that's like a empire on the maps in the 1600s and 1700s. There's not a lot of maps that are existent to this day that any ding dong on the internet can just look up and find, but there are some. Okay. Probably anybody who's like a university professor or some bishop or something in the, in Rome might be able to visit some libraries that are way more interesting than we have, but those books may not be scanned. They may not be on the web, or they might be on the web that I don't have access to, right? Right. But any of us, this is all stuff that all of us, and that's, why not? Let's just stay where we can all work together and all look and verify these things together anyway, without getting weird and getting on a Tor browser and stuff. If you've ever heard of like the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you've ever heard of the Nag Hammadi codices, if you've ever heard of the researcher Zechariah Stitchin, who looked into those, and Immanuel Velikovsky, to take it back another layer, Worlds in Collision, and Velikovsky's early solar system theorizing, much of which was borne out to be observable and provable in subsequent U.S. early years of the space program and probes that we sent to different parts of the solar system, the Voyagers, the Mercury, etc. Interesting people with interesting ideas about the history of origins of humanity. When this is what's key to that, is that this story of Tartaria sort of goes back to there. The story of the mystery of Tartaria like challenges our beliefs about what year we're even living in. Yeah. Okay, like the whole chronology of humanity is up for dispute in this, conspiracy, so to speak, if we want to call it that. And that is to say that, other people have already identified before the Tartaria name or label ever came up, that potentially the Dark Ages and the Renaissance weren't exactly the way they've been represented on the modern calendar. We have the known change from like an earlier calendar that was a lunar-based calendar and closer to a 13-month calendar to a 12-month calendar year. We originally, once upon a time, had like a 360-day year, not a 365-day year. So was our orbit different back then? I don't know. Like our actual orbit around the sun, because people seem to know. Like, it's not like they're really guessing at a lot of this stuff. They seem to know a lot of shit. Like astronomers and astrologers before them knew a lot of shit. Astronomers, for all their fancy trappings these days, really, are playing in the exact same sandbox as the astrologers they want to hate on all day long. Tartaria reaches all the way back into the mists of time, and people in other areas of research have previously identified that there has been some weird fuckery with our calendar over the years. And in particular, there was like that change to the, we were on a Gregorian calendar, which was close to what we have today. But this final modern calendar has a slightly different name, and it was named after the monk who originated it and made it for us. I can't remember, I'm sorry, but
not a problem.
That is said to be the most fucked up year, because at the same time they introduced a weird little connotation in front of the actual calendar year, which was an I, and then like a numeral I.
Yeah.
Is that a 1? Is that an I? What the fuck is that I doing there? Why are you there? Are you an I or a J? Because on top of it, you see a J also in some cases. It's either Iesus or anglicized, westernized Jesus.
Okay.
Okay. So the older form of Jesus would have been represented with an I, as far as I understand, in like earlier forms of Old English and Hebrew and shit.
It'd make my name real fucked up.
There you go.
Iasi.
Exactly. Totally. So this goes back to, so what we've got is the other big part of, so where's the evidence of Tartaria, Steve? Why are we talking about this? Well, these guys are basically claiming that the Roman Empire as we know it wasn't so much the originator of all this beautiful architecture that we see all around the world, that became the influence for, countless generations of people, whether they were in Europe or whether they were in Europe in the 1500s and 1600s and 1700s, or if they were in the New World in the 1700s and 1800s, whether they were in the Pacific, in Japan, in China, in Pacific Island nations, like Thailand, buildings with columns and arches and domes and megalithic stone constructed, by the way, usually out of just a few key materials. It'll be white marble, or it'll be, and it'll be tailored to the region, but it'll be the best, most durable, most badass rock of the region, rendered to a, 33rd degree stonemason level of perfection, built to last the, mists of time, all around the world.
Yeah.
These people these researchers looking into this will also point to many, many instances of Renaissance era paintings, we call them, that are early Renaissance, like fantastical paintings, like fantasy paintings, they call them. And these paintings that they refer to are all depictions of like the fallen old world, and or familiar Roman monuments like the Colosseum and other places that we can visit today, in that area of the world, but depicted as ruins covered with vegetation, with the people around them, laying around in towels, eating grapes off the ground and hanging out amongst the ruins and occupying them, but certainly living in a different type of, monument than you see all cleaned up and leveled out, cleared away and polished up and put back together today. And so the modern scholars say, well, yeah, no, they didn't really look like that. They were perfect. They were fine. This was fantasy, and to which the researchers, of course, scoff and say, well, why would you draw that? Why would you paint that? Why would you even think of that? That's your idea? That, this went on for decades. There's thousands of them, many different painters.
Right.
Not
it's like they couldn't have all had the same idea.
Two guys. Exactly. This is what I'm saying. It was like a style. It was a thing. So is it that these guys were all cracked out on Greek, fermented olives and drawing weird paintings for fun, or they were remembering something that was changing before their eyes and going away because the city was being cleaned up and, repossessed and inherited
Huh.
from a culture that had gone away.
It's
So-
like how many times has the societies restarted over the course of human
Thank you.
history,
Thank you.
only
Absolutely.
to be wiped clean, essentially.
Yes.
It's an answer
you're
we'll
getting
never
it.
have, honestly. I mean, you hear so many great theories coming out, especially the newer theories. I mean, it's amazing that we could possibly just be constantly fighting this battle, you know. And it's interesting now we sent that archive to the moon because it's like, fuck, here's our new attempt to preserve society. And it's like, all right, we gotta, if we crash, we got to wait till we get back to fucking SpaceX age
There,
to access
Yep.
it.
and I mean, there's what is it? That gold disc also that we put on the satellite that we sent out into space with our coordinates and all that. At least
Yep.
there's some something out there saying we
But
have it.
again, it's off this
So-
world, so you got to get to that advanced technologies to even access it. And it's like, what more do we have than what they're gonna have?
Yeah.
Well, on the one hand, exactly. On the other hand, let's find out.
True.
Because
True.
this touches upon even that question. It's something I should be able to freestyle on because I don't know how hard I went on the notes on that, but we're talking free energy is in here. You know, we're talking
Oh, yeah.
versions of that, and we're talking
Mm.
interesting technologies. And again, you know, the architecture is the thing that's keyed in on first and looked at all around the world. There's a really big sub story to this called the mud flood story, and that, you know, some people get caught up in thinking that this whole Tartarian civilization was uniformly mud flooded all around the world in one shot. And others, I tend to more believe it was big waves of big disasters that, like, one leg after another took legs out of this giant old world civilization potentially.
Wow.
And maybe that happened over just a couple hundred years, but
Mhm.
compared to maybe a couple thousand years of hegemony before that shit would have been seeming pretty rapid, right?
Well, I
to
mean,
to that
look
whole
at
world.
what-
That would have been a big change.
Yeah, look at what even a hurricane does in like the Caribbean to like Puerto Rico.
100%.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I fully believe this is a combination of natural disasters and events, you know, changing of the guard of generations and people, but there's implications that these Tartarians, so I'm indicating that these people are believed to be like a lost worldwide megalithic structure building high society that left its mark on the entire world. And the ways that we're seeing it first is that architecture. And this is why I say anybody can go out their front door and start asking themselves about this after they listen to what we're talking about, because those buildings, like those in Rome that I just mentioned, I was just claiming that, you know, they're saying potentially that the Romans didn't build those buildings. Well, the Romans themselves admit they didn't build the city of Rome from bare ground. They built their buildings on top of, and in particular, like the main center of government, the one of the main couple of buildings, and there's a whole plaza there. That's the center of everything.
The
They found
Parthenon
it.
and all that.
Yeah, that shit was already white marble platform. This is in Roman history. They built their buildings on top of a foundation from who they know not which,
Damn.
to their own admission.
And
That
like,
style of architecture.
same with Egypt
sorry,
too, and the Sphinx. I mean, it's
absolutely.
like
The
how they think
Egyptians
Sphinx
say
was
that
built
they
around.
don't. There you go. They know that they didn't build certain things. They also, we can't find a single hieroglyph in either pyramid. You know, we know that, and we know that they never really directly referenced how they built the pyramids either. I don't know if there was something like the Sphinx for sure was like claimed to be built by somebody, but we don't necessarily think that's really an authentic you know, claim for that pharaoh. I'm not sure. You know, I'm not like,
yeah, there's like
that's
a
not the area
misinterpretation
that,
from what I heard. I believe like it's like something
oh,
gets
it's
lost in
heavily
translation
contested.
or something.
It's
right?
heavily contested, and I'm butchering
Yeah.
the whole mystery by not, you know, doing
might have been
honor to the
remodeling.
people.
That
Yeah.
they
Well,
might have remodeled it.
Totally, a
That's
restoration. There you go,
yeah,
a
which commonly
restoration,
was
right?
done with new pharaohs.
Actually, something about that rings true, because there was something about that was supposedly when the face was changed.
Yeah, true.
And
yeah,
before
supposed
it was
to be
damaged
great.
in modern time. So,
Mhm.
was that Khufu, I want to say? And let me
Oh, man,
just
I
be
never
totally
remember
wrong
the
there.
names. I have a
Let me be
stellar
totally
memory.
wrong.
It's
Yeah,
very-
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Well, This is all super like in depth and crazy interesting. I know you go into it like way more on your shows. You take a topic, it seems like, and dive into it and just analyze all the evidence that you can come across.
I try. I mean, this is one that some people are dedicating their whole channels to and doing nothing but content on this. And, my interests, remain a little broader than that. It's fun, this mystery, because it kind of connects to so many things that, it can just be there, whether I focus on it or not, somewhere in the background. Because, this is one that we have already done an episode on. I did one back in December. So December of last year. And that one was called The Mud Flood Deception and Grand Tartaria. And that's one where I start to tell people like what channels I found initially that got me looking into it, what I had figured out up to that point in time, in terms of what the timeline looked like and the history. There's evidence of Tartaria in North America. There's, questions about, such topics as like the former little understood and barely acknowledged North American mound builder culture, which would be a predecessor culture to the First Nations people or Native American Indians, that we know today that are, remnants of perhaps the North American side of the Tartarian Empire, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
This mystery would posit that why the fuck did we land settlers here in the late 1400s, early 1500s, kept sending ships the whole time. We never stopped sending ships over. 50 and 100, 50 and 100, 200 people all the time for the next 200 years. And you're telling me we never could get our asses off the east coast of this country into the continent? The speculation is that it wasn't just trees and mountains that kept these people back. It wasn't just Indians on horseback that didn't have rifles yet. That was keeping the Western settlers back, that it was perhaps the remnants or a still somewhat thriving old world civilization that had ties to Tartaria, perhaps folks who were the last of them who had fled Europe, which had 50 to 75 years prior been shellacked with versions of mud floods and earthquakes and other, calamities that reshaped that whole region. Atlantis is mixed up in this one, of course. It's in the part of the world that,
like you said, it all sort of ties in.
It's a good one that way, and there's a lot of threads that could be tugged on that lead far places with this. Let's see here. So the timeline for most people to look into is right around 1812. Okay. So as I said, you have settlement in the New World in North America as early as the late 1400s, but no real action until the late 1700s when the 13 colonies got their shit together, threw the yoke of England off of them, then in very short order turned around and declared war on everybody else left in North America. Let's not forget. Okay. We declared war on England in 1776, right? Won the revolution in a few years, 79 or something like that. We, become a nation. We're still under the Magna Carta and we're waging war on the remnants of the French and the Canadians to the north of us. And, a few years after that, we chased the Mexicans out of California and Texas and New Mexico, right? And took all of them. We got the Louisiana Purchase, from the French under Jefferson, the second president.
Yeah.
Okay, and Louisiana Purchase is 2/3 of the continent. So my point is we had that territory on paper, but we didn't do shit with it, until after Jefferson we had coastal cities in California at that point too. All right, we sailed around to get to them.
Correction,
Right?
third president, but we're not that far off.
TJ was third. There we go.
I was thinking John Adams. I was
Thank you.
I don't want to correct him if I'm wrong though.
He's so forgettable. Darn it. Sorry, John Adams. Come on. He didn't do that much that I can recall. I can't pin too much on him.
Well,
so that's all. Good job.
His son upstaged him with the beard. So
to this day. Was it his son? I thought it was his brother, but no, you could be right.
Maybe I could be wrong about that too.
So, we had our coastal cities. We had like some settlements in California, but we couldn't cross the middle ground for all that time until, you know, the mid 1800s. You know, we started, you know, going right after Lewis and Clark, but we didn't really settle the West for, you know, 50, 60 years. Right.
Yeah.
And then not too long after that. So, well, let's back it up and stick on 1812 as much as we can briefly, because there's a couple of reasons why 1812 is important. You got the War of 1812 here in the United States, where again we fought off England for the second time in a by proxy war that was almost entirely waged by mercenaries. England didn't even really come back here to fight us in 1812. They sent Hessians under the command of a few, you know, British generals and things like that, because they didn't even want to waste their own people on us at that point in time. Some would say, you know, because it wasn't even a war that was meant to be won necessarily. But at any rate, in the same years leading up to that, you had the year without a summer. Not leading up to that, it was immediately after it, the 1816, the year without the summer. That would be a year where it was some of the coldest recorded temps in history. The years immediately bumpering it too were, of course, pretty shitty. But 1816 was the worst, and it is believed to be a like downstream effect of something that may have happened around 1812, something that may have happened in Europe, because at the same time we were having our war, Napoleon was fighting Alexander in Europe. The Napoleonic Wars were happening at the exact same time. 1812 was like a year for wars all over the place. In fact, you could almost they just don't call it a World War I or World War Zero, but it kind of was. They were, you know, doing as much as they could almost everywhere they could to topple.
You know.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. So that's an interesting thing about 1812. And yeah, so you can, you know, I can point people at plenty of places to really go directly after that. Like they can, so one of the best first places for people to like research on this, like if they want to read, because obviously YouTube, go to YouTube and type in Mudflood, go to YouTube and type in Grand Tartaria. You know, if you want to, go to my YouTube channel and find the podcast there if you want to.
Right.
I'm walking around my local area. Not just Seattle, but since I drive for my job and visit different shops, I'm kind of in a lot of different parts of the state. And so I have started doing video of buildings that fit the bill a little bit of being older architecture. Mm-hmm. The Tartarian researchers would claim that these buildings are older than represented, everybody, right? Because I already told you that they said that we fucked with our whole world's timeline by as much as 1,000 years, sometime back in, you know, Renaissance era, Roman, you know, Catholic, Vatican, you know, influence of the world time when they were running things and changed the calendar. That even our modern era is a little bit jumbled and confused because of it. And while, yes, the last 100 years or so, maybe even 200 years or so, we pretty much have a handle on, as soon as you go any further back than that, it's really quite fucky.
Yeah, that's where you start kind of losing it.
Yeah, and so these buildings are said to be older than we think they are. They have certain characteristics, those being, if you want to look for them in your own town, go to the old district of your town, of your city, and look for municipal buildings, look for universities, look for churches, and look for windows that are at or below ground floor level. Look for daylight basements, so to speak. Look for, at that same building, a interestingly raised main entrance that goes up 4 or 5 steps. That main entrance will usually also have an enormous opening, almost all of them arched. Some of them have been squared off. We've been squaring off buildings for, you know, the last 100 years for sure in this world, right? We've switched from the curvy stuff to rectangles, right? The whole world is ruled by rectangles right now, in terms of style and stuff. But the buildings will have these characteristics over and over again. Really big entrances, a first floor that's itself now several feet above the sidewalk level, or you have to go up those stairs, go through the main entrance and the foyer, only to drop back down to that main floor. Windows at the ground level that are, if they're not submerged, maybe above normal human head height at sidewalk level and or from you inside. Kind of seeming like, well, if I was 10 feet tall, I could look out this window, no problem.
It's like, that's not exactly.
And I also would have been able to open the front door because it is also 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
You know, and again, these will be banks, there'll be churches, there'll be universities, there'll be libraries, there'll be places of law, right? Mm-hmm. And when we go to our town's places of law, like the, you know, whatever the local seat of government is, Olympia, Washington, for example, looks like Washington, D.C. You know, we have a Capitol building that looks like the fucking White House down there. I'm not kidding you, you know, and many cities, many states do, you know, and many cities, governors, fucking state house they built for themselves emulates this style.
Yeah.
So this style of like arches and columns, vaulted ceilings and domed roofs, this Greco-Roman and neoclassical style architecture is the architecture that you'll want to look at in your local area. And if you see these ground floor windows or a building that's half buried in the side of a hill, and you also know that the city has a history of one or more historic giant fires that occurred or other calamities that befell it.
San Francisco's big for that.
There you go. Boston, Massachusetts, many others, sections of New York, a couple different times in history, you know.
Hell, even Venice, the whole place is sinking into the ground.
Los Angeles had a historic fire, after which the city was built up upon the old layer of the old city, right? They always tell us this story about how, well, they decided to cement it all over and close it up, and now the subway's going through there and the sewer for the new buildings is going through there, and we just built a whole layer up, right? So, you know, we're not thinking about Europe, where France has a huge underground that's, you know, legendary, you know, the likes of which, exactly.
This goes deep.
These buildings are all around the world, and these buildings aren't just all around like Europe and North America. These buildings are in the fucking South Pacific. They're in China. They're in Japan. They're in Asia, everywhere throughout it. And so, you know,
so you would everybody say that these buildings are sort of evidence of the fact that these like structures we make do push into the ground, which could have happened to these past civilizations, essentially.
So there's ways of understanding how these buildings, you know, were recovered or might have been covered in the first place,
right?
As opposed to like sunk down in situ, because it's really hard to make a big So as tantalizing as that notion is, and as much as like something called liquefaction is a phenomenon that happens to solid ground when it's subjected to like earthquake vibrations, it happens quite frequently because of them. And it's not just because of the physical, feelable vibration that you and I feel, but it's also because of like ultrasonic, like ultra low frequency vibrations that are part of the earthquake phenomenon, right? That cause this liquefaction kind of thing. And that's when seemingly solid ground becomes even more than quicksand. It becomes damn near, you know, soaking wet. It becomes, you know, it just fucking melts and goes away. You know, whole hillsides just go away in a visibly liquid looking fashion.
A coworker once described to me, he said he was out in the desert looking at a sand dune when an earthquake occurred, and he watched the whole hill just level out.
There you go. You know, and it'll swallow.
I mean, that was sand.
It'll swallow a vehicle whole. But you know, it can happen in many different types of soil compositions, right? For sure. And super interesting phenomenon. But yeah, like you can't sink a skyscraper without it getting all crooked and broke. True. You know what I mean? So that doesn't really hold up for, you know, liquefaction doesn't really hold up for a reason for the buildings to have sunk, but it could have been something that occurred at a site at a higher altitude and then rolled in through town over buildings that even today. So let's assume that some of the buildings that I'm talking about aren't just those places of government that I just mentioned, but maybe some of the older skyscrapers that are in some of our cities as well. You know, to which you would say, well, Steve, we have pictures of them building the Chrysler building and shit, bro. And I go, I know, dudes. I know. I'm not really the one to say about which building is or isn't reclaimed, restored, or built from the ground up. But some of those buildings, again, like the timeline that we're working with is the last less than 200 years. and we don't even have photography before around the 1830s or 1840s, somewhere in there, as a technology.
Let alone writers or literacy for most of, the population. If people aren't writing this kind of stuff down, then a lot of that.
All right, so they like barely invented it in like 1827.
Okay.
So it's not even quite 2027.
Yeah.
So photography is less than 200 years old.
Yeah.
So let alone film, video, aka video, kids. All right, we're talking about video. So the Tartarian researchers would say that some of the older buildings in all these centers of big cities around the world, including some of these skyscrapers, are reclaimed buildings. Some of them would be then even bigger than we think they are because they're potentially 20 or 30 more floors below ground, or more. Who knows? This is it's a story that's pretty nuts. I mean, I told you guys. I let's see here. I want to see if there's anything that we did talk about. Mud floods.
Man,
the timeline is right around that 1812.
It's another wild example, though, man. I mean, in history, most people don't realize that there was multiple human species out there, like the Flores man that was like a hobbit creature, things like that were mostly bred human species with Neanderthals. So it's crazy, it's
supposedly I have some of the Neanderthal DNA.
100%, me and you both do.
There you go. Right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
So we're learning more. We're learning more about stuff like that.
We forget everything, and now we're just to an age where we easily record everything, and it's on all of these things.
But it makes it fun to look at it as a mystery and explore it and try and find the answers and come to maybe a consensus that isn't necessarily what everyone's been subscribed to.
Yeah, it could be a lot of fun, man. And the thing about it is it could all be real. It could be, you never know. I mean, it's hard to tell until we dig deeper into the earth,
That's why you keep looking.
We find more evidence,
So I will say this, and I want to give you guys this, not a warning, but a proviso, or it is a warning, I guess. No, this is the thing that
You thought we were deep before.
Well, one thing that people, when they look into it really closely, they're going to find two things. First thing they're going to find is a lot of the people who are looking into this are not of the globe Earth worldview persuasion. A lot of the older maps are a flat Earth projection style map. And a lot of these flat Earth researchers have somehow been some of the first ones to come across and start looking at this area of history. And there are connections to the flat Earth theorists sort of, again, worldview that you'll run into. I would encourage people to just be cool. We're smoking weed. Just seriously be cool and go check it out for yourself if you want, if it sounds interesting. But, take it with that grain of salt and let those people be the people, because you're not going to find this by too many other researchers right now just yet. But you will find people who aren't explicitly flat earthers, myself among them, that, are totally transfixed by this story. And it has made me look more sympathetically upon all the flat earth stuff that I have to kind of come across and filter through as I look into this.
Yeah.
Those people are doing more fucking research than that Netflix documentary remotely made look by the looks of it. And from what I understand, the very people who they picked for the Netflix documentary are the least representative group of flat earth researchers in the world. You could do
that with any group, know. I mean, that happens with stoners stereotypically across the board.
Thank you. Boom. Good job. 100%. Totally victimized and at the mercy of the mainstream media, which is why we podcast, right? So that's why we can't fucking get any value.
Know what we can do.
That's it. Hey, I can do at least as good a job as these slobs who are lying to us every day, and I'm trying not to lie to people every day.
Now, if people wanted to look more into this or, find more of your stuff, what's the best way for them to get at you?
So I definitely think they can, just by Googling up Grand Tartaria, go probably hog wild on that subject and mud flood. YouTube, love it or hate it, value it or not, it's actually one of the very biggest content distribution platforms that's ever existed. Well, probably is. I think it is.
Yeah.
And of independent content with as much as we worry about, how much is being surfaced right now on YouTube. What's interesting about my podcast, Baked and Awake, is that just by being involved in conspiracy, quote unquote, topics in the least, I may be taking a hit on YouTube right now on their algorithm for recommended videos. A lot of people don't know that, but recently YouTube made a big change to how they're letting, you see stuff on their platform based on preferences that you've previously expressed.
Right.
So they're kind of actively suppressing a lot of this very stuff, actually, which is interesting. But you get on YouTube and you specifically use the search term like flood or Grand Tartaria, and you'll find that topic is super rich. I have at least 2 episodes on just this that are on the podcast Baked and Awake, which is bakedandawake.com. And then, I did mention earlier, I did some videos of walking around looking at the buildings in my local area. And, if people want to see what I'm, actually going on about in terms of the architecture, you can definitely start there. There are a few other people doing really good work just like that and doing,
nice.
Even better work like that on
That's
YouTube
awesome.
as well. So, yeah.
You're also on Instagram. I mean, that's where we mostly have chatted. I
We
believe.
do have a lot of fun over there. Thank you. No, you're right. And I should mention, follow me there. Same name, Baked and Awake. And that's where that's where I let my sense of humor come out and have fun with stupid memes. And you'll see pictures of the
Beautiful
garden at
plants.
work. Yep, you see the pictures of garden at work. You'll see the pictures of our backyard garden. If you are a gardener like I am, that's actually something that we didn't talk about much today, but I'm all about the plants, you guys, not just cannabis. So if you want to geek out on plants, come and follow me on Instagram and I'll point you there.
Nice.
At my wife's account too, because that's where you can see the whole farm. Because we have chickens, we have bunnies, we have bees,
Oh, cool.
Honeybees. So we're doing a bunch of weird shit in our backyard in Seattle.
That's awesome.
No goats or anything, we kept it to that. But there's a lot of that stuff because we have a couple of young kids, so we're
Nothing
having fun
wrong with
all of that.
Some fresh eggs.
That's it. That's and maybe I'll go have one after this.
There you go.
It's not ready. I didn't really eat before we jumped on today, so.
It's been a long one, but it's been a good one.
Thanks you guys. I could go really on about this one for a long time, but I already have too. So please check out the podcast episodes about this. And then when you find the other, researchers out there, you'll really get the rest of that picture. I think it's still evolving right now. So people are learning more about it all the time right now. So I think, this would be a fun one to continue to look for and see if I do more content on it, because it probably means I did find, more fun stuff about it, or else I won't dedicate a whole episode to it. I think it's one of the coolest mysteries that I've come across, period. And the whole time I've been looking for topics, and I'm just over 70 episodes now. You guys are a little bit ahead of me on that front. What are you at 100 yet?
140 something.
Son of a
42.
cockerel. That's a lot of shows, you guys.
Got some hours under our belt.
Yeah, man.
Good.
Now, I will say, I know at the end of your show, you always do a sign off. We have our own sign off as well.
Oh yeah.
We do a that's it. There you go. After I hit my there you go. You wanna do yours?
You got it.
All right, man. All right. Well, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of knowledge and dropped. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Cominski. Check out his podcast, Baked and Awake. It's fucking awesome. You'll dive deep into some fucking bombs of truth will be dropped on you. All right. And just thank you for joining us on this journey. We love each and every one of you. And until next time, that's it.
There you go.
Smoke indica and do shit anyway.
We smoking America. We passing America. I'm mapping America. I'm second America. We talking America. We blazing America. This is fucking America. We second America.
This has been American Slacker Podcast. You can reach the show by searching American Slacker on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Reddit. Or send them an email to americanslackerpodcast@gmail.com. You can download and rate American Slacker on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and all other podcast platforms. Visit the show's website, aspodcast.com, where you will find every episode, official merchandise, and links to their Patreon if you would like to support American Slacker.
Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Think about the seconds that are passing. Man, I gotta go and get it, grab it. Why you gotta go and acting savage? Smoking weed, I gotta feed the habit. Now I'm on some other shit. Things that I gotta go get. Medical all on my slip. You falling like dominoes, bitch. Stuck in my ways, fucking high days, fucking sideways in the driveway.
We smoking America. We passing America. I'm mapping America. I'm psyching America. We talking America. We blazing America. This is fucking America. We second America. We second America.